The question that we receive the most was actually about trends and kind of what we see happening in the space at a high level, what gets us excited about new things happening in hardware development. So, what about you, Kaethe?
Oh, I don't want to be the pessimist here, but I do think it's important to talk, as we're talking about hot trends, that we're excited about. I also think it's important to talk about like what are the trending topics that, I don't want to say keep me up at night, but maybe keep my clients up at night. And so I do think it is really important to mention, the global electronic component shortage that is still ongoing. And it's a component shortage, but it's also a supply chain disruption. And without getting into too much history, I mean, during my Dragon days, Dragon was owned by Avnet, which I think is the largest electronic components distributor globally still. And so there was electronic component shortage back then, very difficult to get to capacitors, for example. It impacts large companies and small. The problem for startups is you're going, oh, I only need, 10 capacitors per product, and I'm only making 250,000 devices. So like a fairly small number of capacitors. And then you look at how many capacitors are in the Ford F-150 computer boards, how many capacitors are on your iPhone 12. And you can understand why, if a distributor has a choice between giving Apple or Ford the capacitors that they need for their products and giving you, your 200 per product or however many I just said, you're going to be pushed to the bottom of the pile. So I was listening to an event earlier this week where a VC I very much admire was saying she was shocked and appalled that some of their portfolio companies have resorted to like trolling eBay for various components. I don't know if it's capacitors. Kyle, you'll have a better thumb on this than I. But certainly, sensors and certain chips, it's an issue. So there was a shortage back 2 years ago. I think it recovered slightly, but then we were hit by, tariff wars globally, which had a big impact. And then there was a global pandemic, which is still, we're seeing the after effects of that. I do think this will continue for a long time. Eventually, I do think we'll get back to normal. Let's be positive about that. So there's a positive trend, but I do think right now it behooves anyone making physical products in the hardware space, the connected space, to plan ahead and then make a plan B and then make a plan, B.1, C, D, et cetera. Consider whether you need to dual source your critical components. So again, to Kyle's point, if you've identified on a 1 through 5 scale, certainly those highest risk components or, cost driving components, I think it's just be very aware on a per component basis, what the lead times are for everything that goes into your product and your packaging as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that. The lead time for a startup to get a component, even 1,000 components, sounds like could actually be even greater than, a larger company trying to get a larger size of components just because of that relationship.
And the buying power is not there. I mean, I think you'll see echoes of this throughout that supply or throughout the product development process, where I can't tell you how many times startups come in and they're like, we want Apple quality, in the plastics. We want it to be white. We want it to be high sheen. However you're going to define your CMF, your colors, materials, and finish. And the problem is you might want Apple quality, but you're going to pay for it. And you can't demand 120-day payment terms like Apple can. And so, understand what the echoes of demanding Apple quality have throughout your schedule and your cost and everything else, and particularly now. So again, I know I brought us down and being a pessimist, but I do think it's important to be aware of, no matter what stage you're at, it's the quotes you're seeing, if they're 6 months old, it's like, oh, sure, you can get these chips, these sensors in 12-week lead times. It's probably not 12 weeks anymore.